Harrowbrook Manor, a grand and foreboding remnant of a bygone period, stood as a remnant at the edge of a dense, ancient forest. In the little, remote hamlet of Blackwood, the huge home with its tall, dark windows and ivy-covered walls was the stuff of legends. The mansion had a reputation for being mysterious and terrifying for many generations due to rumors of hauntings, missing people, and an unimaginable evil that lurked inside its walls. Unable to resist their curiosity, a group of friends decided to spend the night at Harrowbrook Manor, in spite of the rumors and the locals' cautions. The proposal was first put out by the group's daring and flamboyant leader, Oliver. "We've all heard the stories," he said with a sly grin. "But are we really going to let some old superstitions scare us away from a night of adventure?" His friends looked at each other anxiously. They included Emma, who had long been captivated by the paranormal, Michael, the tech-savvy and logical thinker of the group, and Sarah, the group's skeptic. After much discussion, they finally gave in to their curiosity and accepted Oliver's proposal. They left towards Harrowbrook Manor after loading their luggage with sleeping bags, flashlights, and enough supplies to spend the night. The forest appeared to get deeper and darker as they got closer to the mansion, with the trees standing watch like silent sentinels. Unease could be felt when the wind rustled through the foliage, but they persisted because they were eager to solve the manor's mysteries. When they arrived at Harrowbrook Manor, it was much larger in person. A large ornate door that was framed by stone steps leading to a grand entrance creaked open with a spooky groan as they pushed it aside. The mansion's interior was both opulent and ominous. Fading tapestries covered the walls, and dusty chandeliers hung from the ceiling. The faint sound of murmuring appeared to fill the hallways, and the air was thick with the smell of rotting. Oliver took the lead and went through each room. He found a collection of antiquated volumes in the library that were written in weird symbols and incantations. A forgotten dinner table in the dining room was coated with cobwebs and appeared to be waiting for absent guests. Sarah trembled as they made their way up the huge staircase. She mumbled, "I can't believe we're actually doing this." Ever the logical one, Michael giggled apprehensively. "Sarah, it's just an old house. Nothing to be concerned about." But as the evening drew on, odd events started to occur. Michael's electrical equipment mysteriously stopped working, while Emma claimed to have had a glimpse of a dark figure out of the corner of her eye. And with their faces blanched with fright, the company assembled in the parlor that was poorly illuminated. Oliver made an effort to keep up his bluster. "Our imaginations are simply deceiving us. We are starting to feel this area." A melancholy song appeared out of nowhere, like if a piano were playing by itself. They followed the sound, which took them to a drawing room with tasteful furniture. They looked up to see the piano empty, much to their surprise. They became aware of an elaborate mirror on the wall while the music proceeded. Its glass had an almost mesmerizing aspect since it was so dark and reflective that it appeared to absorb the light from the room. Emma was lured to the mirror and warily approached it. She thought, "This mirror is so unique." Her reflection changed as she stared into it. Its features twisted and contorted into a hideous nightmare-like face. Emma's heart was pounding as she yelled and staggered back. The mirror's reflection extended its long, twisted fingers, reaching out to grab her as the space seemed to come alive with evil energy. The group screamed in terror as they fled the chamber in panic, sending shockwaves across the mansion. Disoriented and apart, they found themselves in a poorly lighted corridor. They began to shout out to one another in a panic as their voices reverberated through the corridors, which seemed to go on forever. Sarah found herself in an ancient nursery, afraid and lost. Toys were strewn around the floor of the room, and the walls were covered with faded wallpaper that was coming off the walls. She heard a lullaby as she turned to go that sounded like a ghostly mother singing to her long-lost kid. Sarah ran from the nursery in terror, only to find herself somewhere else in the mansion. The mansion itself seemed to shift and transform, its layout a maze meant to befuddle and disorient. Each passage seemed to lead to a different time and place. Oliver, meanwhile, was in a dimly lit study. The shelves were crammed with dusty volumes, their pages brimming with obscure information. One book, an antique grimoire encased in leather and decorated with strange markings, caught his attention as he was browsing the titles. He opened the grimoire and started reading aloud from its pages out of curiosity. Unbeknownst to him, The incantation he chanted released a powerful and evil force that had lain dormant inside the mansion for a long time. A dark apparition with a distorted form formed in front of Oliver as the room grew icier. His mind was filled with illicit information as it slyly whispered sinister truths into his ear. Oliver's sanity broke down as the creature engulfed him, and he turned into a puppet in its hands. As he accepted the darkness that was now engulfing him, his once endearing smile changed into a menacing grin. With the aid of his analytical thinking and technological know-how, Michael was able to locate a secret passage that went to a dusty attic. He discovered an ancient journal that belonged to a previous owner of the mansion among the boxes coated in cobwebs and abandoned artifacts. The man spiraled towards madness as he became fixated on the drawing room mirror, was described in the journal. It said that a malicious presence lived inside the mirror and drank off the anxiety and hopelessness of anyone who looked into it. Michael was aware that he needed to discover a means to reverse the curse and set his buddies free. He returned to the mansion's interior, determined to face the evil power, armed with the knowledge from the journal. Emma, meanwhile, discovered herself trapped in time at a lavish ballroom. The eerie music of an invisible orchestra was being waltzed by the ethereal dancers that filled the room. She spotted glimpses of her friends among the dancers, their faces twisted in pain. Emma desperately wanted to save them, but her touch couldn't penetrate their phantom shapes. It was as though they were ensnared in an unending dance of suffering. Michael made a startling discovery as Sarah, Oliver, and Emma each confronted their own nightmares inside the mansion. A mysterious, otherworldly monster that thrived on dread and hopelessness was imprisoned in a hidden room beneath the mansion, which he discovered. Michael repeated an invocation he thought might loosen the entity's grip on the mansion while holding the journal. The evil force's power dwindled as the chamber shook and it howled in pain. Sarah, Oliver, and Emma experienced a brief respite from the evil spirits that had plagued them when they returned to the mansion's hallways. They felt a glimmer of optimism and a window of opportunity to get out from the mansion's grasp. The friends returned to the drawing room with the evil mirror, directed by an unseen force. They found Michael there, who shared his discoveries and his strategy for ending the curse. They faced the mirror together, its dark surface pulsing with evil. Sarah read the incantation from the journal, determined to put an end to the nightmare. A loud scream resounded throughout the mansion as the mirror's surface broke and splintered. The mansion itself seemed to revolt against their acts as the mirror broke. As though trying to keep them inside, the corridors and walls twisted and trembled. The companions, however, were steadfast, and their combined strength lessened the evil force's control over the mansion. The evil being was driven from Harrowbrook Manor with a final, despairing cry, and the manor itself started to fall apart. The mansion fell around the guys as they hurried to get away, making their way dangerous. They were able to escape the dilapidated estate, just in time thanks to their tenacity and cooperation. As Harrowbrook Manor crumbled into a pile of debris, its evil influence was eternally extinguished. The sky was painted pink and gold by the first light of morning as they emerged from the ruins. It appeared as though the curse had been lifted as the once dark woodland sprang to life with newfound life and beauty. The buddies were exhausted but triumphant since they knew they had endured unspeakable atrocities and survived. They had fought the evil power that had possessed the home for many years and prevailed. The nightmare of Harrowbrook Manor was gone, but the friends were left with unanswered questions regarding the supernatural entities they had come into contact with. They were aware that they would always be haunted by the events of that terrible night as a warning of the perils that awaited in the shadows and the power that could be gained in cooperation. And as they left the ruin, they could still hear the echo of the evil force's cry, a chilling reminder of the evil that had once inhabited Harrowbrook Manor. The mansion's mystique would endure, but now it was a story of bravery and tenacity, of friends who had faced the unknowable and come out stronger. The buddies understood that some puzzles should be left unanswered, and that some places are best left unexplored. They would always remember Harrowbrook Manor, but it would be a place they would never go back to. The estate had been both a nightmare and a symbol of the eternal strength of friendship and bravery. Once upon a time, the remains of a mysterious civilization known as the Elderons lay in a remote region of the earth, concealed deep behind a thick, ancient forest. The existence of the Eldorans had long since vanished into obscurity, despite claims that they possessed wisdom and might be beyond comprehension. Few were aware of their history, and even fewer dared to investigate the mysteries of the long-lost realm of the Eldorans. Sarah is the protagonist of our story. She is an intrepid archaeologist who loves to solve the riddles of the past. She had heard rumors about the Eldorans, legends that had been passed down through the decades among the inhabitants and told of a secret, cursed city deep beneath the forest. Sarah was driven to discover the truth behind this fable since her curiosity was so intense. Sarah started traveling one bright fall morning. She entered the thick, overgrown woods with her trusted bag maps and a sense of anxiety. As she moved further into the forest, the atmosphere became dark and ominous. Some bent and gnarled trees appeared to be whispering something to the breeze. Some days passed into hours, but Sarah persisted. Finally, she came across the first indication of the Eldoran civilization, an elaborate archway covered in moss that led to an overgrown walkway. It appeared as though the woodland was directing her toward a long-kept secret. The lost kingdom of the Eldorans soon emerged from the shadows in a clearing where the trail eventually ended. Standing in front of the massive, crumbling ruins, Sarah's heart was beating fast. The city was a maze of finely carved stone structures that were inscribed with mysterious symbols and runes. It was a spot, stuck in time, eerily lovely. And as Sarah started her painstaking investigation, her excitement was obvious. She learned more about the strange silence that permeated the city as she dug deeper. It appeared as though the entire air held its breath in anticipation of spilling its beans. Sarah built her camp inside the ruins as night fell. Eldorans performing ancient rituals and ominous ceremonies were appearing in her nightmares. She felt an eerie presence lurking in the shadows as she awoke in a cold sweat. Her illumination flickered, leaving the walls with unsettling, twirling shadows. Sarah pushed on, determined to go further into the city. A huge circular room with a gigantic stone altar at its center was unlike any other chamber she had ever encountered. A large gemstone that gave off an ethereal glow was placed on the altar as decoration. As Sarah became aware that she had located the epicenter of the Eldoran civilization, her heart rate increased. She sensed an unexplainable connection to the gemstone as she walked up to the altar. It had an odd energy that pulsed and appeared to connect with her spirit. She stretched out and touched it without giving it any thought. She was engulfed in a brilliant burst of light, and when it faded, she realized she was in a completely other location. The area around Sarah had changed. She was now in a nightmare realm full of spectral beings and hushed voices rather than the ancient city of Eldaran. She understood the diamond had sent her to a dimension she couldn't understand, and panic swept through her. Sarah went further into this weird reality, desperate to go home. She came across evil beings who were attracted to her. She was encircled by ominous tendrils of gloom that appeared to be alive. With each stride, the air got colder and the voices in the shadows got louder and scarier. Weeks stretched into days as Sarah fought to survive in this terrifying world. She came across bizarre creatures and saw terrifying images that would stay with her forever. She nevertheless clung to the ruins of the Eldoran city in the hopes of discovering a route back to her world. Sarah eventually found a portal in the shadowy dimension's depths after what felt like an eternity. She turned it on with shaky hands and was immediately taken back to the Eldoran city. She was relieved, but it didn't last long because she noticed a change. Unnatural, wailful cries could now be heard echoing throughout the crumbling city, which had once been silent. The atmosphere was permeated with an overwhelming sensation of dread, and the shadows appeared to writhe with a fresh malevolence. Sarah was aware that she was responsible for the ancient civilization's curse, and that she held the power to either save or destroy it. Sarah went back to the altar and the shining gem in a desperate attempt to break the curse. She had a horrible sensation that the only way she could ever expect to salvage the Eldaran civilization was to face the darkness within herself. She touched the gemstone again with quivering resolve, and this time the flash of light took her inside of her own head. Sarah faced her greatest fears and regrets in the recesses of her mind. She had to deal with the fallout from upsetting the historic Eldoran city, as well as her mistakes. It was a terrible struggle for atonement inside of her. The Eldoran city surrounding Sarah changed as she battled the darkness within. The sobbing screams faded into quiet as the shadows retreated. The centuries-long curse that had afflicted the civilization started to fade. The Eldaran city's remains back in the real world, started to disintegrate and vanish as if they had never been there. After her vision returned, Sarah discovered herself in the now empty forest clearing. Although the curse had been lifted, the Eldaron civilization had to be lost as a result. Sarah made her way back through the forest with a heavy heart, bearing the burden of the lost kingdom and the curse she had unintentionally set loose. The Eldaron's existence would stay a mystery, stored deep within her consciousness as a somber reminder of her foray into the unknown. But just as Sarah believed her suffering was over, she was in for a startling surprise. A rift that threatened to let darkness enter her world was left between the two realms by the portal she had used to exit the murky reality. Sarah realized with conviction that her search was far from ended. To stop the evil forces from entering her realm, she needed to figure out how to close the gateway. She uncovered a ceremony that may permanently close the split as she dug deeper into the secrets of the Eldorans and their knowledge. However, the ceremony was dangerous and compelled her to face her own worst emotions. Sarah understood that she had no choice but to move forward since the fate of her world was at stake. She set off on her most perilous voyage, yet with fresh bravery, ready to confront the toughest test of her fortitude and will. Sarah experienced a growing sense of dread as she learned more about the Eldarin culture and the intricate details of the ritual. She would not be allowed to shut the portal without a battle by the entities who had followed her into the eerie domain. They attempted to weaken her determination by insidiously threatening her and tempting her. But Sarah persisted, fighting both the internal and external darkness. A final conflict between her will and the evil forces that were attempting to infiltrate her realm loomed. More than ever, the stakes were extremely high, because the result would determine not just the future of the Eldorans, but also her own reality. The suspense increased as the rite came closer to its conclusion. As a storm of gloom and sorrow gathered, Sarah could feel the evil spirits. The ground shook beneath her feet as the air erupted with malice. The crucial moment has finally arrived. Sarah was in front of the portal, or chasm between worlds. With the help of her inner strength and the Eldoran's expertise, she started the complex ritual. The evil powers struck forth, appearing as horrifying specters and nightmare images. But Sarah was adamant in her resolve. In order to finish the ceremony, she battled through the pain. She closed the portal with a final burst of energy, a dazzling flash of light devouring the rift and the evil entities along with it. Sarah was aware that her environment was once again secure as the illumination faded. The evil forces were defeated, and the Eldarin civilization's curse was lifted. Sarah had to sacrifice a piece of herself in order to preserve her reality, but the cost had been terrible. Sarah returned to her regular life with a sad heart, her memories of her foray into the unknown haunting her for the rest of her life. She would keep the existence of the Eldorans a secret until her death. She had, however, come out of the experience stronger, wiser, and irrevocably altered. The story of the vanished kingdom's forbidden curse, which was a tale of bravery, selflessness, and the eternal force of the human spirit, came to an end as a result. Sarah's journey into the depths of the night had changed her, a reminder of the enigmas that linger in the remote reaches of the globe and the insatiable curiosity of those who dare to explore them. A frightening calm hung heavy in the chilly night air in the center of the small, rain-soaked town of Harrowsfield. The streets, which were typically crowded with people, were now empty. Your spine tingled as the wind howled, sweeping through the little passageways and producing an unnerving chill. A gloomy Harrowsfield house, a formerly splendid estate that had descended into disrepair and desolation, loomed in the middle of this unsettling village. The mansion was rumored to be haunted and cursed by an evil spirit that would drive anyone who dared to enter. The town's old-fashioned appeal, however, attracted Mark and Lisa, a young couple, despite the local stories. They chose to buy Harrowsfield House. After dismissing the rumors as ridiculous superstitions, they vowed to bring it back to its former splendor with all their might. The first few days of the remodeling went through without a hitch, but as they dug further into the secrets of the mansion, odd things started to happen. Jewels would abruptly disappear and then strangely reappear. They experienced automatic door closures as well as phantom footsteps echoing through the deserted hallways at night. Despite these unsettling incidents, they held to the notion that they were just having an overactive imagination that had been stimulated by local ghost stories. One chilly evening, while Mark worked in the dimly lit study, a mysterious coldness swept across the space. When he turned, he noticed a shadowy figure hiding in the doorway, which made his heart race. Fear seized him as the figure appeared gradually and then disappeared in an instant. Mark and Lisa became more terrified as the odd events happened more frequently and more intensely. One night, Lisa woke up shaking with panic, only to see her own image in the mirror mouthing, "Get out," in a voice that wasn't quite human. They decided to stay still in spite of their mounting anxiety, attributing their mounting disquiet to their active imaginations. But when Lisa disappeared one fateful night, their world plunged into genuine tragedy. Mark frantically examined every square inch of the house, his anxiety growing with each passing second. He entered the ominous basement, where the air was thick with an unpleasant vibe. He noticed Lisa hiding in a corner, quivering in fear. In the faint light, she gestured with shaking finger toward a wall-mounted antique mirror. When Mark turned to face the mirror, he saw their own image, but a dark creature loomed menacingly next to it. He spun around as his heart began to race, but saw nothing. As Mark reached out to touch the mirror, it appeared to be moving like water. Suddenly, a hand reached out from the mirror's depths and snatched Mark away into the shadows. The moment the screen went black, Lisa's screams resonated throughout the home before she was sucked into the basement's odd silence. The small room seemed to reverberate with her own heartbeat. The fear that had been caused by the mirror image persisted until its disappearance. As Lisa stayed confined to the evil mansion, hours passed into days and days into nights. She made frantic attempts to flee, but she was stopped by an invisible force. The walls of the house changed and shifted like a maze, appearing to oppose her exit. She occasionally heard Mark's voice calling to her from the other side of the mirror, but she was unable to reach him since her hand appeared to be a ghost and slipped through the surface of the mirror. The house itself changed, with the ability to move and rearrange the rooms as desired. The mansion changed constantly as doors led to unexpected locations. As apparitions, ghostly specters of persons who had once lived in the house, began to appear, Lisa began to see them. They appeared and vanished at random, as though they were ignorant of her presence. She could hear their whispers, laughing, and cries in the reverberating passageways. One fateful night, Lisa found a secret chamber hidden behind a dingy bookshelf after becoming lost in the constantly changing labyrinth of rooms. She discovered a long-lost diary inside that belonged to the mansion's first owner, Edward Harrowsfield. Once he turned the brittle pages, she discovered a terrifying truth. Edward had dabbled in evil magic and used mirrors to seize the town's citizens' souls before he abruptly fled and left behind his cursed home. And with this newfound information, Lisa made up her mind to confront the evil spirit that was hiding in the mirror. She entered the cellar again and halted in front of the menacing-looking glass. With a shaky resolve, she yelled, "Edward Harrowsfield, please free Mark from this evil property. I demand it." Edward Harrowsfield, caught in between realms, emerged with a vengeful chuckle as a ghostly form emerged from the mirror. Lisa and Mark were able to escape the house after a terrifying encounter with Edward, finding safety in a close-by motel. They were worn out mentally and emotionally, still reeling from the horrors of the previous night, but they knew they had to go back to the mansion to figure out how to permanently exile Edward. Weeks passed into days as they combed through information on evil spirits and haunted places in quest of a fix. They came into an old legend about a sacred ritual that exorcised demons. This ritual had to be performed at midnight under a full moon and called for certain items. And with this newfound information in hand, they worked up the nerve to go back to Harrowsfield House. They could immediately feel Edward's presence as they entered. They noticed the evil in the air as the lights flickered and died as a freezing breeze blew through the rooms. In the dimly lit living room, they swiftly grabbed the required supplies and started the ceremony. The room rattled and shook as they recited incantations. "You cannot banish me," roared Edward as he suddenly appeared in front of them in spectral form. Then a loud crack of thunder followed a magnificent flash of lightning that had just lighted the space. Edward was ejected from the home against his will as the room was drenched in blinding brightness. They eventually let out a sigh of relief, knowing that they had managed to get rid of Edward's evil presence from the mansion. However, there was a persistent impression that the nightmare had not really ended. Lisa and Mark once more made their way to a neighboring motel in search of comfort and relief from the horrors they had experienced. Their bodies exhibited the physical and emotional marks of their struggle, leaving them exhausted, As time went on, life gradually resumed its pre-crisis state. But Edward's laughter and the shadows of his eerie presence continued to reverberate in their brains. They made the decision to list the accursed house for sale in order to cut their ties with it. Lisa discovered a secret compartment in the basement during one of their last cleaning efforts. She discovered an old trunk inside that contained letters, pictures, and a startling discovery, along with other memories from Edward's youth. In one image, Edward is seen standing next to a woman who remarkably resembles Lisa. As she showed Mark the picture, she was overcome with terror. There was no denying the parallels. It appeared as though Lisa were looking into a mirror from the past. They were suddenly distracted by a noise coming from the second floor. They quickly entered the living room where they discovered a shadowy figure standing in the low light. Nobody else save Edward Harrowsfield himself was there. He gave Lisa an awful smile while maintaining eye contact. He said, "I've been waiting for you," and the room echoed with the intensity of his voice. In just a wave of his hand, Mark was sent flying across the room and into the wall as he attempted to rush towards Edward. When Lisa shouted and ran to Mark's side, Edward waved his hand again, pushing Lisa back. As he continued to laugh, Edward's presence loomed menacingly. "You thought you could escape me?" he mocked. Uninterrupted knocking could be heard at the door. After learning of Edward's nefarious return, the town's residents gathered outdoors while brandishing torches. They had arrived to help Mark and Lisa. They confronted Edward as a group. The villagers prayed aloud as Lisa read aloud passages from Edward's diary. The home violently shook, seemingly thwarting their efforts. Edward's figure finally disappeared into thin air with a terrifying roar, leaving an eerie calm in its wake. The residents of the town cheered in unison, and Lisa and Mark let out a combined sigh of relief. It appeared as though the horror was finally over. Years passed, and Harrowsfield House remained abandoned, serving as a chilling reminder of the atrocities that had occurred there. Residents of the village gradually left, but rumors of weird sounds heard at night, including laughter that echoed throughout the empty hallways and shadows that danced through them, persisted. The mystique surrounding Harrowsfield House persisted. It was always wrapped in terror and mystery, waiting to trap anybody who ventured to learn its secrets. The couple's ordeal had made a lasting impression on them, and they couldn't help but worry whether Edward's evil influence would ever completely be destroyed, or if the nightmare would return in some new and unanticipated form. They pondered the full scope of the paranormal powers that had haunted them for so long as the uncertainty of the future cast a long and ominous shadow over their life.